using AI, generative AI, specifically large language models in agentic structure, reading these documents and extracting that information is a huge lift off of the hospital's administrative back. This would take something like 10 to 20 hours, a team of 4 to do before, and this is reduced now to an hour, and the accuracy is very, very good.
I think you used the word broken. Did you say broken? That there is something broken in healthcare? This is a very interesting angle. Tell me more about what's broken in healthcare.
So yeah, and then what I've noticed is the smaller your context window is, the better. So almost small language models are more effective than large language models, if that makes sense.
AI, is it hype or help? G'day and welcome to the show. I'm your host, Pete Cooper, and our topic is AI, hype or help. Today's guest is Petar Lazic from Axon Advisory. He helps healthcare organizations make the transition from AI as a wish list to something that's real execution. We go deep into the healthcare, so hang on for the ride. Let's get into it. Welcome, Petar. Welcome to the show. Petar, you're with your company called Axon Advisory. First of all, welcome. And secondly, tell us a little bit about your business and what you do.
Absolutely, yeah. Thanks for having me. This is quite exciting. It's one of my favorite topics. So yeah, I'm the founder of Axon Advisory. It's a healthcare AI and operations advisory firm. My background spans in healthcare ops, revenue cycle, analytics, automation, and then most recently with AI-enabled workflow design. And really the focus of the organization is to help organizations figure out where AI can genuinely improve their work, what has to be fixed first, creating efficiency through optimization of current workflows and whatever technology is available, and then how to move from interest to governed practical execution.
So whereabouts are you located, Petar?
I'm based in Chicagoland, downtown Chicago specifically.
Okay. And so I guess you have a ready pool of healthcare organizations to work with. Do you narrow it down? Is it hospitals? Is it clinics? Is it some other healthcare organizations you focus on?
Yeah, my background has been really kind of the gambit. It's been practice management from physical therapy clinics all the way up to large hospital systems, both non-for-profit, commercial, public health. In the consulting industry, we really focus on the larger scope of things, but we also had large physician groups, et cetera, et cetera. But Axion is really focused in that mid-size range where the folks are going to try to optimize and bring new technological innovations within their practices.
Right. Awesome. Well, that sounds fascinating. So, I mean, how did you get into this, Petar? Let's take a step back. Where did you come from and how did you arrive here?
Yeah, I have an eclectic background. I initially wanted to be a doctor. So I worked with an X-ray, which is a really interesting, radiology is a fascinating part of the hospital, simply because you work in several different departments. One day you will be in the X-ray department, the next day you'll be in surgery, the third day you'll be in ER, fourth day you're going to orthopedics, fifth day you're doing portables. So you kind of get this plumbing view of a hospital, for lack of better expression. And something clicked there. If you have the plumbing, you also have a satellite view from my perspective. But I had an interesting opportunity to go sell exotic cars in my early 20s. So I did, and helped build a dealership with a mentor of mine. And that's where I caught like the finance and business bug. Then I spent some time in logistics, working with friends, and eventually decided, hey, what do I really want to do? And I wanted to take some of the pragmatic and practical experiences that I learned through business development in the logistics world and fix healthcare. And that's how I got into practice management. And there we went from paper to digital, and I was hooked. And I wanted to do that for large hospital systems. And I got into consulting.
Nice. So exotic cars, that's a very, very different field to this. I mean, when we talking Ferraris and Lamborghinis, that type of thing.
Yes.
Now, that must have been fun.
Yeah, it was awesome. We started with 6 cars and grew it to 60. It was a wonderful experience.
Yeah. You'd get to drive them and, be with them. Yeah. As a young man, I always wanted to have a Ferrari. I don't know why it was a Ferrari. That desire doesn't seem to be there now. But I do watch some podcasts with some guy in the UK that rebuilds these broken and damaged exotic cars.
Mhm.
But that's a side issue. So you mentioned also that there is, I think you used the word broken. Did you say broken? That there is
Mhm.
something broken in healthcare?
Mhm.
This is a very interesting angle. Tell me more about what's broken in healthcare.
Well, there's a lot, both from a operations perspective and then also from a philosophical perspective with some of how our insurances, essentially the burden of proof is on the entire physician side
Right.
of the practice. So the money is almost like an escrow with these
Mm,
insurance companies, and they're basing their decisions off of claims. And to get to the claim to be as proficient and accurate as necessary per each insurance, per each plan, per each group, it's quite a lift on the hospital side of things. And
mm,
there's this misconception that, oh, there's all this billing that some of that most of that billing is dictated by the insurance side of things. So
mm,
there's a firstly an imbalance from that perspective. And
mm-hmm.
then secondly, there is the administrative hygiene within hospital operations is subpar. There's
Yeah.
just there's no other way to say it.
Yeah.
Um, so
So
there,
coming
yeah,
from outside of the US, I found it extremely confusing. And also moving into that area with some of the products and services we offer, I found there was a number of $265 billion, which is money that goes into the administration of healthcare, which is about, I think it's a third of all of the costs for running healthcare in the US is administration.
yeah,
And I believe there's some active federal initiative to try and change that. But it seems like an enormous amount of overhead because none of that goes into the pockets of those providing the service
mhm,
or those that receive the service. So it's a really big bolt on
mhm.
um, just to make it run. Now, is this something that we're talking to? Are we talking about the same thing? This massive amount of money? Yeah.
Yeah. This inefficiency, there's this huge gap that causes it's almost like an iceberg versus
Hmm.
the treatment that you see at the top versus actually where the money is funneling and going into costs that are just large inefficiencies, truly.
Mm, yeah. So you mentioned this other thing which is surprising to me. I think you said the burden of proof lies with the physician.
Mhm,
So it lies with the doctor or the person who's providing the service. So it sounds to me like what you're saying is they have to take on responsibility to provide the service and
mhm,
then justify that they can get paid for it after the fact.
mhm. And then the defining layer of complexity within that is that each insurance company, so like the major ones, let's say Blue Cross Blue Shield, their healthcare, Aetna,
Mm-hmm.
Medicare, Medicaid, they all have specific standards that are set to specific plans, and there are
Mm,
millions and millions upon plans.
mm,
So you can have a Blue Cross Blue Shield patient that has Blue Cross Blue Shield of Illinois that pays the same amount as a Blue Cross Blue Shield of Connecticut, but has an entirely different um, getting their like primary benefits checked and how payment is dispersed.
mm,
And now those nuances still fall upon the burden of that physician or that
mm,
hospital administration group. And the complexity is just too vast to keep up with that. And then everyone changes from year to year.
mm. So it's always hard to explain complexity simply. I often struggle with this um, as well. I'm going to try and unpack it. So let's maybe talk some of the numbers. I think there's 100 plus insurance companies in the US. Maybe there's more. Would each one of those have its own method of communication? Like it's not a standardized way to communicate with that insurance company.
Correct.
So that's
Different
one
portals.
complexity, right?
Yeah.
So you got to kind of know your insurance company. And who can know 100 insurance? The interface between each of those is slightly different. Like you said, there's a portal. Um, I mean, well, I was without insurance here in the US for a while and finally got over the line on it.
Mhm,
Um, Having such a difficult insurance and overhead system
mhm,
does mean that there's people out there that aren't getting access to service, right?
mhm.
Because either there's these problems with the administration they can't get over, or they just can't afford it. So a lot of
Mhm.
people, and for this country, which is the wealthiest in the world, it still shocks me that some people just can't get access to the basic needs, of healthcare.
Right.
And I guess that's the tragedy of this. It's fine if you can afford it all, but if
Mhm.
you can't afford it all, then you're out. Um, so that must be that's another rabbit hole we can go down as well.
Oh yeah, 100%.
I
And
mean,
I
if
think
we
a
could,
lot of that gets solved with solving the inefficiencies first.
yes, right. So all right, well, let's jump into that. So
Mhm.
you work with a range of healthcare providers. Tell us a story, if you can, about where you've maybe solved an inefficiency. I guess ideally with AI, that's the topic of our conversation today.
Yeah, a lot. There's been several inefficiencies that I've come across. Revenue cycle is a funny thing within the healthcare system because um, it is a cycle, but it is treated as silos. So it's split into three pieces, which is access, and then mid-revenue cycle, which is like coding and grabbing actual interaction with the patient, and then back end.
Mm-hmm.
So there are a lot of aspects that go into this. So that patient access point is where you collect the patient information, and then you
Mm-hmm.
also have to run their insurance. So do they need pre-authorization? Do they need certain pieces of information? And this is something that uh, the hospital organizations and physician management groups and MSOs lived and died by, because if one piece of information was grabbed incorrectly at that entry point of how that person's insurance was read, well, then downstream, a lot of things go wrong. So one of the biggest inefficiencies that AI has been able to solve is reading these complex payer contracts that can be anywhere from 50 to 200 pages, you
Mm-hmm.
know, and you get one at the beginning of the year. So all of your, the hospital creates deals with United Healthcare, specifically with this specific branch of United Healthcare. Everything follows that subsequent contracted rate and all of the rules alongside of that. Using AI, generative AI, specifically large language models and agentic structure, reading these documents and extracting that information is a huge lift off of the hospital's administrative back. This would take something like 10 to 20 hours, a team of 4 to do before, and this is reduced now to an hour, and the accuracy is very, very good.
Mm.
So these are just basic issues that using uh, basic generative AI can solve kind of right off the bat.
Mm. So you said there was a team of four
Mhm.
taking a 10-hour day, I think. Was that what you were
10 to
implying?
20 hours, a team of 4 to do this. So about a half a week's of work, a team of 4.
And that came down to what again?
Hour and a half, 2 hours.
Wow. For the same team.
Yeah, and you're just using one model. You're just running essentially an automation
Yep.
that has a large language model attached to it, which is the fancy word is an agent.
Yeah. Uh, it sounded like about a 10 to 20 reduction in time and effort.
Yeah.
Wow. That kind of makes sense. So just for our audience to sort of understand that, this to simplify it, there's a lot of text that needs to be read so that you can apply the correct access and get it reimbursed. But for someone to read and understand all of that, I can't imagine that job, honestly. I think it would be awful. But LLMs are very, very good at reading text, especially if you prompt them well and you say,
Mhm.
I'm looking for this and I'm looking for that. So it kind of brings the context into the reading. And it seems like almost a perfect solution, provided, and this is always the kicker, it does it accurately. Did you
Yes.
ever come across any accuracy problems?
I've noticed that the accuracy problems are only happen more frequently in very large context
Mm,
situations. So if I have, for example, a very demanding research prompt, and
Mm.
I wanted to pull information from hundreds and hundreds of sources,
Mm.
and those are varying sources. That's when I've noticed mistakes, but it's not like it used to be.
Mm.
And hallucinations were solved because the issue was how the system was being fed by the data scientists in the back,
Mm.
where a non-answer was treated as a punishment versus any answer. So the system was taught through like a X's and O's, and it decided it's better for me to make up something than to not give something and say it's not that I don't know it. And
Oh.
that in the last 2 years has been ironed out by like the Anthropic folks, the OpenAI folks. It was the reward system mechanisms that were in the back of the models of how they were trained.
Wow.
So yeah, and then what I've noticed is the smaller your context window is, the better. So
Mm.
almost small language models are more effective than large language models, if that makes sense.
Oh,
Clinical,
okay.
yeah, like clinical language models are awesome, but they won't know anything outside of that.
So that would be a model that is isolated in some way and then dedicated specifically for clinicians. Does that mean it's a model running privately on its own server or its own computer?
Or yeah, they could be renting cloud space within a server spot. But yes, it's
Okay.
they're running. Uh, there are certain models that clinical models that run specifically within that organization's network. A lot of them are like the for radiography,
Mm.
and that one's a very high impact use case because there's hundreds of millions of hours of actual recording of the radiologist reading the image, so they can overlay the language over the image of what was diagnosed and train the models that way.
Yeah, wow, that's a whole other area
Mhm.
of imaging. Um, so this was fascinating how you can so just to summarize here, we've got the ability to take a large language model and put it into a private space and tune it, fine tune it for the clinical space so that
Mhm.
it doesn't react like a human. Sometimes humans do the same thing, don't they? They say they make up an answer rather than say they don't know.
Right. Yep.
And it can be a cultural thing, right? I think
Mhm.
in some cultures, I think Scandinavia, Europe, a little bit, they don't mind saying, I don't know. In other cultures, maybe in Asia, that it's very uncomfortable for them to say no, or they don't know. Yeah, and I think it takes a certain level of self-confidence in humans to say they don't know. And then what's the next step? Well, you don't know. You can maybe find out. Maybe you can't find out. Um, I guess I noticed this with using large language models, as we all do, and just how friendly they are, how nice they are, how willing they are to please. And
Mhm.
as you say, the reward system is there for pleasing.
Yep.
So producing something that looks good, which might completely wrong. Yeah, I mean, I guess their reward system is contained within the chat. It's not a human being has its reward system, which goes a bit further on than that. Like they have a long-term career, they have credibility, integrity, things like that, which are
Mhm.
part of their reward system. Anyway,
Mhm.
it sounds like that particular problem is solved, and it's producing results.
Mhm.
So that means we could have a very big impact on this $265 billion because we can 10 to 20 times reduce at least a piece of that. Is there another area that, um, I mean, the imaging side of things? Tell us more about that.
Yeah, there are so many areas. A lot of the coding and documentation is repetitive, and a lot of the human error comes in there. But even
Mm.
before,
Mm.
um, even downstream from that is ambient listening technology,
Mm.
which is, I think, probably the single best application of AI in the healthcare space. Um, the, the problem of that entire burden of the organization being on the clinician in that space with a patient, and their entire interaction is taking the notes.
Mm.
And what they're doing is they're going through a checklist, kind of like a pilot, uh, crossing things off, almost avoiding the possibility of getting sued,
Mm.
because that's another burden that they have. And then they have to be able to reference, to be able to diagnose later, to actually get the code that's going to go onto the claim.
Oh.
So they have this really intense space where they're focused on just taking these notes. And what ambient technology, listening technology does is it removes that. It just listens to the conversation. The doctor can go and treat, and it hears everything. And automatically, through kind of the same thing with radiologists, we have hundreds of years of CPT codes, diagnosis codes, ICD-10, ICD-9, all the codes that before that of here's what was documented, here's what happened, here's how it was treated.
Mm.
So now we have all that training data, we have the audio, and now it removes that necessity of having to do documentation right there, and then it removes after work documentation,
Mm.
because that's where the doctors get killed. Their bandwidth, they have to go home, and then they have to go through their charts and write up the whole notes, the plan of care. They're called SOAP notes, which is like exactly what the insurance is going to get that's going to justify this care. So the level of work is like, okay, they're at the hospital for 40 to 60 hours. Then there's another 20 to 25 of documentation at home.
Oh, wow.
And in this, so there's a huge clinician burnout. And simultaneously, the smartest people of this country don't want to have to work like this. So they don't go into the field. And what it's caused this vacuum where we're losing this great generation of doctors, highly capable doctors, and they're not sticking around to train the new generation fast enough.
Wow.
So it's almost a race to be able to augment some of this crazy workforce and burden that's causing this clinician burnout to
Mm.
happen,
Mm.
and this ambient listening technology into the coding AIs and automations is the light at the end of the tunnel with this.
Wow, I didn't really realize. I mean, I guess I'm ignorant to the life of a doctor here in the US, but it seemed to me a lot of people would be drawn to being a doctor because they wanted to provide care to others. They naturally wanted to do that. They wanted to understand people, work with people, help people. Now, they didn't expect going into that that they would have to do so much tick boxing and dealing with insurance claims and the rest of it. So I can definitely understand. Um, there's a misfit between what their desires are and what everybody essentially wants. Well, not everybody, but
Yeah,
most people who receive care want the attention of the doctor, and the doctor wants to provide the care, but yet we've got this thing jumping in the middle there,
mhm,
creating this overhead and burden.
mhm.
Um, yeah, what was the name of that tool the AI tool that helps with that?
It's called ambient listening technology. There are several
Right.
vendors in the space that do that.
Ambient listening. So that it sounds to me like it's really just sitting there um, and collecting the information, whatever's being said, and
Yeah,
turning that into text, and then making good use of that to help guide him to making the proper insurance claim.
correct.
Mm,
Uh, it could be on their phone, on their laptop. Places like the Mayo Clinic and Cleveland Clinic are putting like microphones in their ERs. And
mm-hmm,
here's the other fascinating aspect of this.
mm-hmm,
If the powers that be within these hospital organizations, the most prestigious ones, play their cards correctly, they take by having these recordings, a litigation is completely solved. If something happens, you have the ability to pull up exactly what occurred. But B, it takes away the power of the insurance's data play.
mm,
Because right now, that's what makes it so American, is that we have a third party private company that has our healthcare data, not our government,
mm,
right? So that's what keeps it American in our world.
mm-hmm,
Uh, but if the hospitals have the entirety of the interaction kept as is, that takes away the validity of the data that the insurance has, and it
mm.
swings the power to the providers now.
Right, right,
That's I see that if they play that correctly.
right. That's fan. Well, that sounds like great news. So it sounds like AI really has a place here in addressing a really key pain point. And is there, and it sounds like there's a path forward. And it's intuitively makes sense to me that administration is something that AI can help solve because I know in my own world, when I'm working with AI, it often cuts down a lot of administrative burden. If I have a lot of documents to read, I can get it summarized easily. I can interact with it through the chat. The chat is very easy way to interact and very satisfying in a lot of ways. So it's presenting things in a way that's digestible to me. I come from a generation that didn't have computers, believe it or not, and it was all on the written pencil and paper. And reading was a very important skill that you had to do a lot of reading in order just to keep up with your basic education, right? Not being a fabulous fast reader, it was always a bit of a problem for me. But with LLMs, I can outsource a lot of that work and still
Yeah.
have all the other things that I think I am good at, the idea generation, the creativity components, the bringing in of new information, the challenging and the big structuring of an argument. All that sort of stuff is now is amplified because I've been able to solve that small piece of the problem. And I think you illustrated really nicely how that works in the field of physicians and doctors. Great news. So, a quick question I've got here for you in our preloaded questions. What are some of the mistakes that people are making when they're doing AI rollout and implementation?
Mm. I think this applies to multiple industries, but definitely in healthcare. They start with the technology instead of the work.
Mm-hmm.
So they kind of ask like, "What's a quick win? Where can we use AI before they've defined the problem that they're trying to solve?"
Mm,
So they'll overlook things like workflow stability, data quality is the probably the most important
mm-hmm.
cornerstone.
Mm-hmm.
Decision ownership, baseline metrics.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they kind of gravitate towards these shiny pilots that really can't survive production. The pilots are great; they show off a really wonderful piece of technology, but the technology isn't as malleable as the organization has to be. It's
Mm,
kind of like in that movie Hitch when he's teaching him how to date, and he says you have to go 90-10 for the kiss.
mm-hmm.
It's like as an organization, we have to change 90% to fit the logical systemic build of how AI operates. It's
Mm,
because we're inefficient, not because it's inefficient. It's really efficient, actually.
mm. Yeah. So one of the things you said there, which we need to unpack a little bit, was data quality.
Hmm.
Um, explain to me and the audience what data quality is.
Data quality is um, both the input collection and uh, data display of your information. So uh, it's are the frontline employees uh, entering the information correctly? So is the information accurate and truthful?
Mm-hmm.
And then that's the first part. And then are there multiple underlying systems? So it's like, do you use one CRM or one EHR, but then have multiple vendor solutions that are plugged into it? So
Mm,
where is the source of truth?
mm-hmm.
That would be a huge data hygiene point.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a lot in the healthcare space. That is going to be one of the hardest parts to solve because 99.99% of organizations, large and small, either have multiple EHRs or multiple technology vendors bolted onto their EHR solutions.
Mm-hmm.
And
EHR
those
stands for what for the audience?
electronic health records. So like there's
Yep.
Epic, Oracle, Athena Health, those Meditech, those are the big ones. That's just like saying Salesforce.
All right. A CRM or customer resource
Yeah.
thing, but put in there. So you're saying that they would have multiple ones,
Yep.
multiple of these different
Yep.
systems running.
Yep. Happens all
Oh,
the time.
and do they
Sometimes they have
talk to each
multiple
other?
CFOs. Yeah, they don't.
They
Sometimes they
don't
have
talk to each other. No.
multiple CFOs overseeing different systems. Yeah.
Right. So is it possible that one patient could have a something in an EMR over here and a different thing over here?
Mhm.
Oh, and they don't talk to each other. So which one is the right one?
Yeah, in theory, the way it should be set up is that each patient has electronic health record. So they have one number that presides over that system.
Right.
It should be ported over, but kind of similar to, uh, you know, being a doctor isn't as attractive. Being an IT person in healthcare is like the least attractive after Silicon Valley and financial tech, and then healthcare tech is kind of last in line because there's so much bureaucracy and it's
Mm.
really hard to get things moved, and it's slow. And
Yeah, interesting. I was working for a company a few years back where the IT guy was there and he was actually pretty good, but everybody was treated him really, really nicely. And then they had this funny little thing. They had this office uh, where the IT guys were. It was a little closed office with servers and everything running, and there was a couple of guys in there. And you'd knock on the door, and they'd open the door like this, and they'd peek out. What do you want? Can I come in? No, you can't come in. Yeah, I've never seen that before. I've never seen such a closed door policy, and they would like shut off completely from the rest of the organization. I don't know what was going on there.
that's funny. There was that great show, the IT Crowd.
Yeah. Yeah, this was exactly that point. These guys were separated from the rest of the world. Yeah. Yeah, okay. So let's talk about where do we think the low-hanging fruit is? Where else can we go and make some big gains with AI?
Uh, I'm very optimistic about AI, so I see this upcoming time as the age of abundance.
Mm.
If we can figure out
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
how to get our stuff together, um, I think the gap between AI ambition, I think there's a gap between AI ambition and operational execution.
Mm.
So that's what I think like the first steps are, because a lot of these leaders, people don't know what they don't know, and AI moves so quickly
Mm.
that a lot of it is learning it is not so technical as it is mental, like getting the approaching it with the right mentality versus it's almost like the way that we were using computers before was like a bicycle. With AI, it's almost like we have a tricycle, and people aren't realizing that it's actually gotten easier for us to interact and get more out of our technology.
Mm.
So these leaders are surrounded by all these tools, vendors, agents, and these pilots. They can often lack a practical starting point.
Mm.
So I think this is a huge space, like mapping these workflows, starting to understand where the proper data that we need, where the sources of truth are, to prioritize use cases, define the governance. Um, I think this is where our biggest gaps to fill are right now. Something I've noticed, especially in healthcare, is a lot of these folks who want these solutions, who see these really cool things. It's like some of their technology stacks. It's like they have a Fiat, but
Mm.
now they want to put this Ferrari engine in it.
Mm-hmm.
It's the wheels will fall off the moment you hit the gas.
Mm.
And these are so this is where this low hanging fruit is this the show Mad Men. Don Draper's like, if you don't like what's being said, change the conversation. That
Mm-hmm.
is the lowest hanging fruit, is changing the conversation of how this is done, and not using these really aggressive words. And it's the part of AI right now is not going to be pretty.
Mm.
It's going to be, we have to tell you, you might have to rip out your entire system and all of your investments for the last like 5 years. This isn't going to cut it with how the technology is working.
Oh,
Or
wow.
so yeah, so some of those conversations have to happen.
Yeah. So it seems like we've gone down a path. We're so far down and so invested in it. Now we have to sort of backtrack the path or cut across the bush to get to the because that path is getting very, very hard to go forward on. And um, yeah, so this is sort of undoing and unwinding a lot of ways of working and changing it into a new way of operating. But I don't think that's necessarily unique to healthcare. I think it just from what we've even this discussion, it's deepened my understanding of healthcare and how complex it is. Um,
Mhm.
uh, if I just use AI in some really simple way, I want to cook something downstairs and I turn on the voice activated thing for ChatGPT and I ask it, how long should I put the chicken in the oven?
Mhm.
And it comes back to me, bang. It's a very simple use, very easy for me to adapt my way of thinking because I would have normally just looked it up on the internet on
Right.
my phone, or the back in the day, I would have come upstairs to the computer, or going back further, I would have asked somebody or gone to the library to get a book, or put, done all those different things. It's just made that process so much sleeker and easier for me. Um, and it was a small step. Unfortunately, these complex systems, it's that small step is really hard to take. Yeah. Yeah. I would like to be able to sort of walk away with the promise that, that if companies made a small investment, they would get a big return. But it almost seems like it's an inevitable big investment. But
Yeah.
it's a painful one that we're going to have to take. Unless, I mean,
Yeah.
do we think, I mean, this is a really broad question. Do we think AI is going to have a big impact on that 265 million? I mean, is that realistic?
Yeah, it 100% is, and something that I always get reminded of is there's a really it's electric cars is the first place where I wanted to say, but there's a really wonderful image from like 1908 of downtown New York City, and it has all the horses, and then it's like 1913, and it's all cars in the
Mm,
same place, and then the same thing happened with electric vehicles, like how long the batteries go, how cheap it is to produce them. Right now, the investment should be to optimize, get your workflows to first principles.
mm,
It shouldn't be just jumping for this technology right away.
mm,
Um, because the truth is tokenization is expensive. And, people think like these agents are replacing a worker. They're not. An agent is just a workflow, but you're going to be paying a tokenization for the use of that compute power. And
right.
that's still not cheap, but that will flatten.
Mm,
That will drop the same way everything else has.
mm.
I've been telling some of the leaders I talk to, they're always talking about EBITDA, and I've been like EBITDA, earnings
Yep,
before
yep.
interest, taxes, depreciation, amortization.
Hmm.
And I've been saying we have to add one more T in there because it has to be earnings before interest, taxes, tokenization, depreciation, because
Yeah.
it's actually a cost.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, they can. Some of them are like, we're just gonna wrap it up into R&D,
Mm.
but and because it costs a lot to build the agent too.
So, okay, so most people would be familiar with, say, ChatGPT and having a free version of ChatGPT, you can do something for nothing, right? Or if you pay a paid version, it's $25 a month or something like that. But we're not talking about that, are we? We're talking about tokenizations. We're talking about going in through an API.
Yeah.
And that's much more expensive, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yes, that's
Yeah.
where you're using legitimate compute. Um, just going through chat, it's not that's so low usage, and
Mm.
that's why they can afford it. It's when you start calling the APIs and pulling them in there and actually building things
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
that it's using a lot of compute power.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, we've seen this before, haven't we? We've seen this when computers came in and the internet came in. We ended up substituting one thing for another.
Mhm.
Um, we substituted, people could do a lot more with the computer. They wouldn't need, their assistant, for example. I used to, and believe it or not, going way back, there was an older gentleman who had a secretary and he did not answer his emails directly. He had each one that was irrelevant printed out for him.
Mhm.
And then he would write his replies on them and hand them back to her. I can't
Yep.
imagine anyone doing that today. But that's an example of a very different workflow. And that was the way things were done before computers, right? The messages and memos were collected for the executive. He would answer them and then they would go back. So you had that person as that doing that piece of work. Computer comes along, everyone's on the computers, they're answering their emails directly. Okay. Now we go into the next level, which is somebody was doing that job that the token is now doing, right?
Mhm.
Um, so the money that's coming into the top of the business isn't going to necessarily give someone a job. It's going now to it's going out to this third party, this
Mhm.
model, these big model makers, the Anthropics of the world. So they're intersecting revenues, is what I'm trying to say. The
Mhm.
money isn't going to provide someone a job; it's going to
Mhm.
fund the AI model. And I guess this is why we've got such investment in this. People can see that coming. The workflows are changing. Money is going to be redirected from the workforce to the AI workforce, who's intersecting that value chain. And that's why these things are nearly valued at $1 trillion. I think Anthropic went up, was it 900 and something?
Something
900 and
insane.
something billion dollars? Yeah. And SpaceX has become an AI company, would you believe? So, they're
Yeah,
all jumping on that because they realize this is what's happening.
they just acquired Cursor, which is like an AI coding tool, one
Hmm.
of the first ones. So that's very exciting.
Was it $80 billion or something they
60,
spent on?
65.
$65 billion. There you go. So you're up with the news too. I saw something like that this morning. All right. So interesting. So where else should we go with them? We talked about metrics. Metrics is another thing. What's some of the key metrics that we should be using in when we roll out AI in healthcare?
I mean, you have to start with the accuracy.
Hmm.
Uh, there was a huge misconception in the very beginning where it's
Hmm.
like we wanted these unbiased models,
Mm,
and those were just signaling words. You want your model to be trained on a large subset of data, but you want it to be very biased to you
mm,
because there are very different treatment cases. So accuracy, rework, error rate, uh,
mm-hmm,
escalation volume,
mm,
um, cycle time, uh, throughput, financial impact, downstream consequences, user burden, adoption. That's all I can rattle off. But
wow,
there's,
that's a lot. That's a lot,
yeah,
Peter. Wow, straight off the cuff, you really do know this really well. I mean, escalation was one that seemed to be easiest to understand. This is where a human has to get it back involved and to figure something out, right? Yeah, and you obviously
yeah,
want to minimize that because you want the AI to do as much as you can.
right. And that escalation is actually the like the red herring and how all of these systems are going to work. Um, a big thing that so many people roll their eyes on when I mention governance,
Mm,
but it's treated like a box that you check, but it really
mm,
isn't. It's a human being operating system.
right.
So it's like we're creating very similar, we're creating a cognitively conscious biological system, operating system.
Mm,
It's overlaid over the AI and will
mm,
be able to intercept almost with like swarm like logic, but the people themselves don't realize they're a part of it and it almost works autonomously.
yeah.
And that's not the low hanging fruit. That's like the holy grail of what we need to develop in this space.
Yeah. Yeah. Gotcha. So there's a lot more metrics we can dig into, and I think we haven't really got time to do that. So I'm coming to the end of this very interesting discussion, and there's a lot we could unpack here. I think, Peter, we need to have you back. Um, do you have any questions for me or things that you wanted to talk about here today?
No, this was wonderful.
Thank you. So one final question for you. AI, is it hype or help?
Um, it is help when it's applied with operational discipline, and it is hype when it's treated as magic and like a solve all.
Yeah.
And
That's a really nice way of phrasing it. That's the best I've heard on all these podcasts. I'm going to have to bottle that up, Peter.
awesome.
There's a lot of really good stuff here. Look, thanks. Stick around, and we'll have a quick chat after the show. But thanks for coming on.
Yep. Thank you for having me.
Well, we went deep into AI and healthcare. Now, we talked about how big the problem is in the US. $265 billion goes in administration. That's about a third of the cost. So that doesn't go to the physicians and the practitioners, and it doesn't go to the patients. It's just a bolt on. It's enormous. Now, there's a lot going on to try and improve that, and AI certainly has a very important place to play. Now, if you want to listen to the whole podcast, there's lots of good stuff in there. If you want to know more about what Skillion does, look to the links in the description. Same for Axon Advisory. I hope that helps, and thanks for watching.